I've seen a lot of people recently complain about an app called Pocket Cast, and it seems like they've added some advertising into what was a previously paid app. So the people that paid for it are now getting adverts and they're not happy about it. But I'm here to tell you that the best podcast player is still one of these, an iPod. It doesn't have to be a 7th generation Nano, although this one does have Bluetooth, so it will make life a lot easier. But if you've got something like an iPod Touch, then that will work just as well, or even a classic iPod. What you might not realise is that you can still actually download podcasts from the iTunes store and sync them to your iPod like you always did. There's a few side benefits that you get of downloading podcasts. Obviously, you don't have to worry about any buffering or the signal dropping out. You can listen to them wherever. And if you're one of those people that worries about how much data you're using, then you can download it on Wi-Fi and then play it wherever. But that's not the main reason to do it. Believe it or not, when you download a podcast to an iPod, you actually get less advertising on it than you do if you stream it from the podcasts app on your phone. I've got the same episode of the Vergecast on both of these devices, and if you look really closely, you'll notice that the podcast on the iPod is about 5 minutes shorter than the one on the iPhone 12 mini. And the reason for that is dynamically delivered advertising. And when you start this podcast on the iPhone, you're going to get a bunch of adverts before you even hear the intro. When you listen to the downloaded version on the iPod, the first thing you hear is the intro. Now, of course, any baked in ads will still be in this device, but depending on the popularity of the podcast, the time of year, and even the region that you're listening to it in, will depend on what type of ads, how many you get, and whether they change. Whereas this version, once it's on there, that's what you're going to listen to. Okay, so I'm just editing this video now, and I was about to get some B-roll to show you a close-up of the difference in the length of each podcast on each device. And the one on the iPhone, the length of it keeps changing. So it's obviously changing the ads that are served to you each time you look at it. So I can't actually get an accurate close-up of what was displayed in the A-roll. But it does go to show that those ads are being delivered dynamically. Check this out. I've got another example. So on here I have a different episode of the Vergecast again. So this episode is our hottest takes on AI's wild summer. Okay, so different episode to the previous example. And I've got the same one on my iPhone 12 mini. If I play this episode,
introducing the new Dell AI PC, powered by the Intel Core Ultra processor,
you get an advert for a Dell PC. If I play the same podcast, remember this is the streamed version on my iPhone.
K-pop to R&B to dance music. Have you ever noticed how nearly every pop song has a Swedish mega producer on it? I'm Charlie Harding from Switched On Pop, from K-pop to R&B.
Both from the beginning of the podcast, before any introduction, you get different adverts depending on whether you're streaming it from your PC or from your phone, but both streaming. Now I'm going to download it to my iPod and see if there's any difference. Let me plug in the old iPod, go to podcasts, and I'm just going to sync that because there's all episodes of all podcasts are going to sync, so you can see ready to disconnect. So the podcast is now on there. You can see new episode. Let's put in some listening devices. Okay, well that's not worked, has it? That's not worked at all, has it? Unfortunately, this doesn't always work. It's luck of the draw. Sometimes when you download a podcast onto your iPod, it will come without any ads up front, and sometimes it will match what's on the streamed version or that you've downloaded to your PC, and sometimes it will be a different set of adverts. So it really does depend when you download it and when you sync it. But ultimately, when you sync this to the iPod, it's going to stay as is. So there is a benefit to downloading them rather than streaming them because they can't inject ads after the fact. So I'd still recommend that even if you're not going to go the iPod route. So if it can't remove ads from the episodes themselves, what about the player? Depending on the app that you use for your podcasts is going to depend on whether you get in-app advertising. So one of the things that the Pocket Cast people have been particularly upset about is that there are banner ads within that app, or at least that's what I understand. You're not going to get that in something like the Apple Podcasts app, and you're probably not going to get it in the Google Podcasts app or YouTube Music, is it? I actually used to love the Google Podcasts app, and I'm kind of sad that they killed it off. That was my podcast app of choice. I then moved to the Apple Podcast app, and recently I've been using YouTube Music, which, if you want my opinion on that particular app for podcasts, it's just a mess. So I wouldn't recommend that, and one of the reasons I'm thinking that it would be better to use an iPod. So you might not get banner ads in those apps, but what you will get is tons and tons of recommendations for other podcasts. Now, that might be useful to you or it may not, but it certainly clutters up the interface, particularly on the YouTube Music app. You get music mixed in with your podcasts, and then you get videos mixed in, and then you get your video feed for YouTube messed up by the podcasts that you listen to. The whole thing's a big mess, and for me personally, I want to keep those things separate. So this method of putting podcasts onto the iPod is much better. And of course, there's absolutely no danger of this ever having banner ads in the podcast app. This thing is not going to be updated any longer. It still works fine, and there's not going to be any changes to the app. So if you're happy with how the app works now, then you're going to just be able to keep using it until one of the things dies, either the iTunes podcast store or the iPod. If you're into your recommendations, when you actually go to download your podcasts on the iTunes store, you're still going to get all of those. So you can do your browsing and you add in new podcasts there, and then your interface for the podcast playing itself is really uncluttered. You literally get a list of all of the podcasts that you're subscribed to that are downloaded to the device, and it shows you whether or not you've got unplayed episodes. It couldn't be simpler. When you click into said podcast, you get a list of all the episodes, and again, it shows you your progress and which are unplayed episodes. It couldn't be easier. When you go on your phone to your podcast tab on YouTube Music, for instance, you're going to get the most recent podcast there, and you're going to get a bunch of recommendations along the bottom, and it's also going to mix in some other stuff to do with podcasts from YouTube, and just a bunch of other random stuff that I don't want and I'm not interested in. And most of them are video centric, which most podcasts are now. I kind of miss the days when it was basically audio first. If you're looking to use the Apple Podcasts app, I would say that the interface for that is slightly better. You've got your up next, suggestions of what you might like. You've got your library of shows and downloaded episodes and latest episodes and all that fun jazz. So I think it's probably a better app. And as of the most recent update to the podcast app, it's now transcribed, so you can actually skip around the episode via text. Even you can search and you can click on that particular part,
Flagship podcast.
and it will start playing from there. So that's pretty cool, and that does allow you to skip past the adverts pretty easily. So there's that. Obviously, there are a bunch of other podcast apps, and many of you will have your favorites. If you want to use your phone to play your podcast, you're going to have an infinite choice. But if they decide to change the app and you don't like the changes, then you're going to have to go and find an alternative. If you get used to the podcast app on the iPod, again, it's not going to change. It is what it is. It's simple, but it is effective. You're not, for instance, going to be all of a sudden bombarded with recommendations from an algorithm that thinks that you like a particular type of podcast because you played 15 seconds of it once. You're just going to have on here exactly what you've subscribed to. Managing your podcasts on your iPod is obviously going to be a little bit more manual than it would be on your phone, because you can't just subscribe to them and have them download directly to the device. You can still, of course, subscribe to them, but you're going to need to do that on your Mac or PC and then have them downloaded to that and then sync them from there. But you could have that done automatically and then sync this thing, say, once a week, and then it will give you a bunch of fresh podcasts to listen to. Managing the podcast on the device, however, is pretty much non-existent. If you want to delete a bunch of episodes or stop following a particular show, again, you're not going to be able to do it on the device itself. You're going to need to go back to your computer. That said, when you do have them automatically download to your phone, it can really fill up your device pretty quick. To be honest, whenever I ran out of space on my phone, it would be the first thing I would go and delete because they keep downloading in the background, but they don't auto remove themselves. So if you aren't streaming them and you are downloading them and you've listened to them, there's no way of removing them automatically, I don't believe. In fact, I'm going to check that. You can remove all downloads. You can hide played episodes, but it doesn't actually remove them. But where's the option to just remove the download once I've played it? I mean, if I wanted to listen to it again, I could stream it or download it again. Let me know down in the comments. Is that a setting that I can set? You can have it download automatically so I can listen to them offline, but once I've played it, it removes them? I don't think so. So in that regard, managing downloads on a phone and an iPod is kind of basically the same. Although you can do it on device here and you have to do it on your computer for this, they're still stuck on here until you manually intervene. It would be good if there was a setting to remove them automatically. What about controls? Well, controls on the iPod are pretty legendary, especially if you've got a click wheel. If you've got a touchscreen one like this, it's not that dissimilar to your phone. You've got play, pause, skip forward, skip back. They're slightly different in their operation, but essentially you can do pretty much all the same things. You're not going to have things like the transcript of the episode that you can jump around in on the iPod like you do on the iPhone, but not all podcast apps have this as yet, although I suspect that will be added. But I'm not sure if that's AI or if that's being added by the creator. I wonder if it tells you. It does say at the bottom, transcript automatically generated. Okay, so I would expect that to be added into various other podcast apps if it's not in fact already. I don't think it is on the YouTube one. You do still get the information box on the iPod. You still get the same box of information that you can scroll through. But obviously any links in the description won't actually take you anywhere. In fact, you can't click on them. So that's another downside to the iPod. And finally, the elephant in the room, which I did mention briefly earlier, is that this isn't really built for video podcasts. Obviously, if you find a place that you can download that podcast as a video, you could sync it to this device and watch it. But if you like to switch between video and audio on the fly, then you're pretty much going to have to use your phone. That said, I don't think you can do that in the Apple Podcasts app. That seems to be more of a YouTube music feature, which is probably the original reason why I moved to it, because sometimes I would like to watch the video version and sometimes I would like to just listen to it, but I don't want to be in separate places on separate apps in the same podcast. So that's a huge advantage if you're a video podcast watcher. But for the most part, there's very few podcasts that I actually listen to and watch. It's usually just watch or just listen. So that's easy enough for me to separate watching the ones that I want to watch on YouTube and listening to the ones I want to listen to on the iPod. But let me know your thoughts. Would you switch to an iPod to start listening to your podcast so that you don't have to worry about your favorite app adding ads or changing the way it works? Or do you think it's silly to hold on to these old devices any longer? Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.